Welcome to the Skoll.org Forum on Social Entrepreneurship, coming to you live from Oxford, England. And now, today, we'll be talking about building resilience. And I'm really delighted and honoured to have as my guest today, Elizabeth Hausler. You're a proud pioneer and an innovator in the construction industry. You're all about creating safe homes and schools which are resilient to earthquake shocks, because you are the founder and the CEO of Build Change. It's a non-profit and it won the Skoll Award here in Oxford 2 years ago. And you learnt about bricks and masonry and building at a very young age because your father is a stonemason and a builder. Is he still?
He's retired now, but of course he'll always be a bricklayer and a stonemason.
But it wasn't just learnt experience, you also went to have a PhD in civil engineering from UC Berkeley. And then you won a Fulbright fellowship to go to India, study and help housing reconstruction after the earthquake in Gujarat in 2001. But I thought your knowledge was not only in crafting buildings, was also in crafting words, to frame a challenge differently, because there's something you said that really touched me. You said, it's time we treat unsafe housing as the global epidemic that it is. It's time that we strengthen every building, just like we would vaccinate every child in a public health emergency.
Yes.
So that is fascinating stuff. So tell me just very broadly about how your organization works.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great. I think it's a huge problem. Our friends at the World Bank say that there are 3 billion people who will be living in substandard housing by 2030. But there is a brick and mortar element. We have to get the construction right. But it's important to make sure it's appropriate for the local culture and the local climate, the homeowner's lifestyle. So there's an architectural component where if we build a building that has a door on the busy street when it should be on the courtyard, that's really not a very good solution. So there's a construction element, there's architecture, there's access to financing. If people don't have enough money to build a safe house, they won't. There's a political will. Building codes should be enforced, that sort of thing. And so it's a multi-dimensional problem, which requires some interesting solutions.
And when you're working with locals, and you say on your website that you always want to adapt to local needs,
yes.
What do you do if local needs perhaps aren't about constructing a house in the best way to make it resilient to an earthquake?
Well, then we need to make it simple for one thing, and we need to make it, again, locally accessible. If we bring in something newfangled from outside that just isn't going to work for the climate, then it's not going to work. But people should have incentives. And what we've noticed in the places that we're working in areas that haven't been hit by the disaster, one of the biggest motivators to homeowners is that they can build a second floor, so they can expand their home. If they strengthen the ground floor, they can add a second floor. Maybe they can rent it out. It's for the extended family. So we have to really figure out what incentives are there and what's really going to motivate the homeowners to take action.
It's interesting because I just was in Ladakh last summer, which is in the north, very, very north of India, very just in the foothills of the Himalayas, and they're very excited about using local, old-fashioned ways of constructing, using mud and straw and not using concrete in order so that the houses can be insulated in winter and also be able to not need air conditioning in the hot sun. What do you do in that sort of situation?
Well, there's an interesting. It's possible to build a circular building that can, out of mud, that can perform well or better in an earthquake. But I think there's an opportunity to kind of combine materials that we know work for the environment and more modern reinforcement or construction methods to improve them. So our philosophy is to make small changes to existing ways of building that people already know how to build with. The architecture is already appropriate, and that way we combine the best of both needs.
And how do you cope with the challenge of behaviour change, or the cultural sensitivities in a community? And perhaps you can give me some examples.
Well, first we hire local staff, and that's one of the most important things to do, because coming from the US, I may have my own ideas about what is appropriate architecture or engineering, but it's better to hear from the local staff. So we started our first program in Indonesia shortly after the Indian Ocean tsunami, and the first thing we did was hire an Achenese architect, an Achenese engineer, and an Achenese quantity surveyor, and really enabled them to make the decisions about how the toilet is oriented for Islamic culture, what building materials are available, and what are their limitations in terms of quality, and really just kind of catalyzing and guiding that local knowledge.
And here you're talking about a building from scratch, but you're also into moderating and changing buildings which are already existent to make them earthquake proof.
Exactly. A lot of times we're operating after disaster where buildings are completely destroyed and we need to rebuild new. But if we really want to tackle this problem, we need to improve the existing housing stock before the next disaster. So then we're talking about retrofitting, structurally strengthening, as well as improving the building. And this can be done in a way that is low cost. It preserves the value of the asset, which is worth a lot more than the cost of the retrofit. It limits the consumption of resources because instead of having to build a new building after the disaster, you can just retrofit the old one.
And so how do you do that? If there was a building, and here we were in this building, imagine the Randolph had an earthquake, although I don't think we were on the edge of a tectonic plate here.
It's not very seismically active here.
Yeah,
thank goodness, because there's so much unreinforced stone masonry. First time I was here, I was sort of kind of nervous walking around Oxford because there's so much unreinforced masonry.
Oh, really?
But yeah, not seismically active here at all.
But if it were, and if Oxford and the beautiful quads and spires were located somewhere which is seismically active, let's say in California or in the Himalayas, what would you do to a room imagine if this was our home?
Yes, so in most of the places where we work, masonry is really the preferred building technology, whether it's brick masonry or block masonry or stone.
What does masonry mean?
So it's some kind of masonry element, either a brick or a concrete block or a piece of stone that should be glued together with some good mortar, right? So the bricks and blocks are stuck together. But it's very brittle, right? And as soon as it cracks, it really loses all capacity to withstand an earthquake. But again, we can't just replace this technology because it's ubiquitous all over the developing world. So what we can do is make sure we tie all the walls together. So put some reinforced concrete or some other kind of element that ties everything together like a big rubber band, so that if the wall cracks a little, it still doesn't collapse. And this type of intervention, it's a small change, and it's been shown if we do this right, then we can really prevent deaths and injuries and earthquakes, and preserve the sort of local way of building and respect the local culture and the local climate and those sorts of considerations.
Maybe we could draw a picture here of what you're doing to the building. So we're talking about a building like where? Can we go for Oxford? Or where would you like to choose your building? You want to go for a seismically active place, I can tell.
Medellin, Bogota, Guatemala City, Manila,
so what are the houses
Jakarta.
Look like
I could
in there?
keep going and going and going.
Okay. What do the houses look like?
Okay, so this is the ground. Wow, it shouldn't be that uneven, but
don't worry. We've got the ground. I'll do some nice grass
if
vegetation.
if we have our building that's mostly made out of masonry, right?
Yeah.
So then what we want to do is put some reinforced concrete, tie columns and bond beams around the building, and make sure that the steel in there is really well connected at the corners, and everything is kind of, there should be one down here too. Everything.
Underneath?
Yeah, all the way around. So it's just,
and how thick is this band, this rubber band?
It depends on the size of building. I mean, sometimes they're inches or centimeters, 6 inches, 15 centimeters.
Okay, so it's something like, show me.
They can be small,
About like that?
Yes.
And is it visible on the outside?
It depends on if you plaster it. So ideally, then we.
And you were doing this reinforcement here on the corners.
Plaster, yep.
Special reinforcement.
Yep.
And then we plaster the top of it.
Yep. And then we put on a nice lightweight roof if we can. But we respect that people need doors and windows, so we make sure that if there is a culture to have a big door and window, that we put some reinforcement. So if we need to have a big door or window, we can put some reinforcement over the top, that sort of thing. And I can't draw the people, though. I'm very bad at drawing people, so there should be people here in our picture.
Okay, yeah.
And I like the tree.
Okay, so we'll draw some people. There we go. So proud homeowner.
Yeah, it's simple things. So again, improving on existing technology in a way that respects local culture and local preferences, that uses locally available materials, skills, and tools. And that's fairly simple and straightforward.
And how have you learnt, and what have you learnt about the best way to affect this kind of behaviour change, to make people want this type of changes to their homes, and for them to do it in a way that meets the sort of technical requirements so that the house will be so much more resilient to earthquakes?
Right. So there's three things. I mean, we're talking about the technology here, but we have to affect political will and the homeowner's motivation, as well as as well as facilitate access to financing. And so what we found in places like Guatemala City and in Bogota, where there hasn't been an earthquake in a while, if we're really going to motivate a homeowner to retrofit, to strengthen their home, then we have to show that you could actually build a second floor on top of here, right? If you strengthen this ground floor, you can build a second floor, which you can rent out for an income earning opportunity, or you can use for your extended family.
And you've got to do this special then.
Yep, again,
this
same
sign.
thing.
And what's it made of, this thing that goes right round, this rubber band?
Usually it's made of reinforced concrete. So concrete with steel inside. And again, making sure the connections are done really, really well.
Okay, connections.
Yep, connections, very good, yeah.
Okay, that sounds cool.
And so
this
this is a great motivator, right? Because it's an expansion, it's an economic opportunity, it's...
And you provide people microfinance in order to build the second floor?
Yes, we've had great success with that in Manila, especially, where people are exposed to both earthquakes and typhoons. And if we enable people to access microfinance, they can not only strengthen their building, they can also expand, maybe improve their kitchen and toilet, improve their leaky roof. So one of the first homeowners we met in Bogota said to us, my house was like a swimming pool before you came along. And that was because her roof leaked. So one of the things we've learned is that we've got to bundle this structural improvement with other improvements.
Waterproof roof.
Yes, that really improve people's day-to-day life, right?
So in a way, are you partnering with other NGOs or other government organizations who are working, for example, to give people access to water or to make their homes, better insulated so they're not going to use so much heating?
Exactly. I mean, I think one of the keys to the success here is partnerships, right? Partnerships with microfinance institutions who can provide the financing, partnerships with governments who have subsidy programs for low-income homeowners to improve their homes, partnering with other experts in the fields of solar energy and power, and some of the other very important aspects of housing that really makes it safe and healthy.
That's the earthquake, by the way.
That's
and the
perfect.
people, they're just not taking, they're resilient, they've got their homes sorted, so they aren't being damaged in any way.
Yes.
And have you had situations when you're working in places which are very earthquake prone that people have actually seen with their eyes that the people who have had their homes done in the way with this special concrete elastic band that makes a difference? Because that must surely be the best way to convince people to go for this solution.
An elastic band is a really good way of describing it, because it is something that simple, just elastic band to tie all the walls together. Yes, we have had that. We've been working in Indonesia for 15 years now, and every few years there's an earthquake there. In 2007, there was an earthquake in West Sumatra. We worked with people to build better, and another earthquake came along in 2009. And none of the homeowners that followed our standards had any damage in that second earthquake.
Wow.
And same thing in the Philippines. We've been working there after Typhoon Haiyan. Another typhoon came through the next year. One of our houses was chosen as the sort of the safety evacuation shelter during that storm. And so, in addition to getting the technical parts right, we have to build people's confidence that this solution will keep them safe. So one of the homeowners we worked with, one of the first things she said when her house was finished was, now I can sleep at night. And so part of this is about about building people's confidence that they're not going to wake up and their house is going to be a pile of rubble. Yes. And that's one of the most important things.
That must just transform communities and transform lives, because we know that when people are under a great deal of stress, they're not making the best decisions.
Absolutely, and especially after a disaster. Yes.
That's really fascinating. But beyond actually working with individual homes and schools, you're also interested, if I'm not wrong, in changing government regulations in order to ensure that the standards that are being used in different countries will ensure that the new homes that are built are going to adhere to safe standards.
That's right. And many places where Build Change works, there is a building code. But oftentimes it's difficult to apply it to a house, right? So we've been able to build that bridge between a complicated, complex building code and the reality on the ground of what it takes to build a safe, strong home. We've also been able to innovate with some of our partners on building codes for retrofitting, so strengthening existing building. I mean, there are very few countries that have these kind of building codes. Colombia is one example. We've been working with the Colombian engineering community and government to implement a building code for the specific challenge of retrofitting an existing building.
And what were some of the challenges around that and that role?
Well, it just takes time, and time to sort of build consensus, time to demonstrate the projects in the field to show that this is, we can actually retrofit one of these buildings in this type of neighborhood. Here's how much it costs, here's what skills you need, here's the design process. And so an exciting thing we've been doing is working with AI and VR and BIM, building information modeling.
Just take them one by one. A whole flood of fabulous technologies. What are you doing with AI?
Yeah, so I mean,
artificial intelligence.
We've mostly been talking about bricks and mortar, but what it's and this is necessary. But what it's really going to take to scale this are innovations on the whole, the entire construction value chain. From how do we assess buildings quickly, how do we design them quickly, how do we access the financing, supervise construction, all of these things. And so with AI, we've trained AI to rapidly assess large numbers of buildings to determine whether or not they can be retrofitted.
So when you say you train AI, what do you use? If you were coming into this room and you wanted to determine, and there had been an earthquake in Oxford unusually, and you wanted to determine whether or not that this building could be retrofitted, what would you do using AI?
We would basically we would have already trained the AI to understand this type of building. And so we would basically only need a photo of it so we can determine where the window locations are and doors, so that we can then put it into the software, and then it can sort of determine whether or not it can be retrofitted. And then we can put it into the BIM software.
The BIM?
Building Information Modeling Software. There's a product with our partner Autodesk, Revit. It's a 3D modeling software. So if we do the structural engineering up front on a type of building, but then every building is pretty much the same. We can just take the dimensions, put it into the system, it spits out a retrofit design, it spits out the cost, the bill of quantity, eventually it will spit out a building permit, so we expedite that process, and the whole thing can go faster, instead of having to send an engineer to measure every dimension, to go back and do a detailed...
That's amazing, because especially just after a disaster, it's just being able to make those speedy assessments and bring in something speedy to actually build that's transformational. Now, we have a question from Eunice who asks, what plans does your organisation have for helping victims who've lost their homes due to Cyclone Idai?
Yes.
And where is Cyclone Idai?
It's in Mozambique.
Okay. The one that we've just had. Sorry,
it was in Mozambique. Yeah. So we're not operational in Africa yet. We're looking for opportunities to support, but we would use the same model that we've used in every other country, where we look at what is the simple engineering solution, how can we access financing, what government regulations need to be changed or interpreted, how do we create an environment where homeowners are really making the decision-making process. So we would use the same model that we've used in every country, because after Philippines, Indonesia, Nepal, Haiti, it's the same problems with the same solutions.
And are there others working in Africa in tackling things in any similar ways that could be working in Mozambique, given the disaster they've had so recently?
That's a great question, and I'm not familiar with the organizations who are working there now, but we'll definitely look into it.
That sounds really exciting. And through this whole extraordinary process and the journey that you've gone on, what have you learned about yourself?
That's a great one. Well, I'm a bricklayer and engineer, and when I started out, I was looking at the problem as an engineering challenge. Of course, we can build a safe house, right? And a social justice issue. It's still both of those things. It's still social justice. Everyone has the right to a safe house. It's a basic human right. It's still an engineering challenge, but it's also an access to financing challenge, and it's a matter of political will. And so we've started to do microfinance, we've started to do advocacy, and what I've found is this is so exciting for me because I get to learn something new, right? And I feel like I'm a perpetual student of how to really change the system, how to change the world, and that's been fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to talk to you. I'm very, very grateful. Elizabeth Hausler, thank you.
My pleasure.
And coming up in 20 minutes, we're going to be talking about B Corp in emerging economies. Looking forward to see you then.